I can't tell you who she is. I know she's beautiful. I know she's an overachiever. I know she's from South Africa. I know she has an amazing, amazing story in her life, stories in her life that she can probably only tell you this much. I know that she's the ambassador to Austria, which at this moment must be very strange. And I know she's going to get a new job soon involving South Africa and the UN. But she's going to have to tell you her name. You won't understand a word she says because she's going to speak in a foreign language, of which we can't translate. Tell us your name.
I will. Can I take a seat?
Yeah, but the name first.
All
I
right.
have to know
All
name.
right, okay.
Do it
Richard,
because
you're
it's
not
amazing.
the only person not to have difficulties with my surname. I remember once the president of the General Assembly asking me if he could not pronounce my surname, and I said certainly not. He had to try. I am Nozipho Joyce NMxakato Diseko from South Africa.
Fantastic.
You don't want this one.
Probably, yeah. Okay. Before I start, I'd just like to mention something to you. I met Richard 2 days ago. He asked me how I was. I said to him I was neither here nor there and was terribly jet-lagged. I had thought that that would have been improved by now, but I think I'm still not quite here yet. So forgive me if my speech doesn't hang together quite as it should, and if you don't quite follow what I'm saying. But I think there might be a remedy for those who feel shortchanged in getting Richard to invite me for next year to come and make good for what I failed to do this year. Many people forget that South Africa is a developing country. Developing because it comprises of a population of 70% that lives in poverty and only has aspects and features that make it look like a developed country. As my generation seeks to rebuild South Africa, and together with its counterparts in Africa, to regenerate Africa, we wonder sometimes whether the world has forgotten about us, whether you will be there with us as we reconstruct. It was therefore with great pleasure that I received the invitation from Richard, which gave me hope that we're not forgotten. It was an extraordinary effort of reaching out for me by TedX to the third world. I come from the third world. I am therefore grateful to Richard for inviting me. I'm grateful also to Richard for giving me a platform. This is the first time I speak in America after the changes in South Africa, to thank the American public for their role in the making of the miracle of South Africa. We South Africans are fully cognizant of the fact that this miracle is as much yours as it is ours. We all made it. In a way, it represents, I think, the nobility of the human spirit at its best. Once we decided that we wouldn't tolerate apartheid, that was it, and it was gone. An extraordinary achievement towards the end of the last century. This is what then I will try to tell you about in a very sketchy way, and forgive me if it doesn't hang together. Many people ask me how it came about that we traveled the path that we did, a path that ensured that as we reconstruct South Africa, we did so on the basis of forgiveness and an attempt to build a culture of democracy and human rights. The way I explain that is that perhaps we were lucky in having a gifted leadership that reminded us time and again that the object of the struggle had never been in the first place to eject white South Africa from South Africa, but rather to create democracy, to build democracy. And once you understood that, then you knew that the white South Africans were going to be co-partners in the reconstruction of South Africa. You therefore then couldn't seek to beat them down in your moment of triumph, for you would lose them. And in losing large chunks of them, you might even lose or sacrifice stability, as it were. So we chose to go the all-inclusive path, ensuring that everyone, as much as possible, was involved in the writing of the Constitution. Indeed, we finished the Constitution in 1996 in a situation where there was no agency managing the South African transformation, but it was us and the international citizenry in giving us support every step of the way. Unlike Namibia, where you had the United Nations, or Zimbabwe, where you had the Commonwealth, it was just us, South Africans, with the goodwill of the international community that was making the new constitution. That was only the beginning of the main task of the making of South Africa, which we would like to hope we still have support from the international community for. Alongside crafting a new constitution, we also had to craft a new culture, as I said, of democracy and human rights. And the key mechanism for doing that was forgiveness. Hence it was that we established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to look into the past, to enable us to find out what had happened that had led to the gross violations of human rights and how it could be prevented in the future. Many people have criticized us for sacrificing justice in doing so for stability. I argue that far from sacrificing stability in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, far from sacrificing justice, we actually bought justice by laying firmer foundations for a just society. But apart from that, for me as an activist, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission enabled me to unsettle the luggage of apartheid, the bitterness that I felt, the anger that I carried about what had happened in the past, and then to turn around and play a constructive role in what is happening in South Africa. Seeing people testify, people who regarded themselves as Christians, about what they had done in the past in the name of Christianity, not knowing that it was wrong, said to me, truly, apartheid was as human as you and I. If somebody could err like that, the best way forward probably is to forgive and to ensure that that never happens ever again. We've more or less finished the first phase of the struggle with the Constitution done and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission having finished its work. I am sure that a large number of my generation feel the better for it. We move on without bitterness, without carrying any luggage that says, as we seek to convert still the white community into lasting committed partners in the reconstruction of South Africa, that we do so in a way that doesn't elicit fears in their minds. We finished the first phase by retiring Mr. Mandela last year. That was very important for us to do in enabling us to learn to handle change and regeneration in building our democracy. We believe it's important that we acquire that at a much earlier stage. Luckily, again, because of the leadership that we had, that went very smoothly. We've laid the key institutions of democracy necessary for enabling us to move forward. We have a constitutional court, we have a human rights commission. However, the real task still has to be done, the mammoth task of ensuring that democracy has a dividend for what we call the previously disadvantaged people in South Africa. The over 70%, I said, lives in poverty. So for me, the TED conference also had an attraction in the sense that I didn't know what I was in for. I suspected I would meet people with ideas, people who do things, people who are enthusiastic about the future. Quite what I would do with those people to ensure that we draw on their resources and their intellect in South Africa, I'm not quite sure. It excited me in that I thought also I might be able to get ideas on what we do in pushing forward this main task of redressing the legacy of apartheid. A larger part of our population is uneducated. A larger part of our population still lives in rural areas. People here are talking about modes of communication which, if inserted in South Africa, could make an enormous difference in enabling us to deliver. The challenge, I would say, or pose to you, is to say, how do we achieve that? Again, I think I would like to stress my gratitude to Richard for reaching out, as it were, to the developing world. I had people here talking about the possibility for poverty alleviation held by some of the technology here. I think the people who make the world aren't so much the politicians. It is the ordinary man and woman in the street, as is the case in South Africa, who goes about making their decisions, the sum total of which yield a particular result. I'm running through this, Richard, very quickly. I saw you ambling towards people. I'm not quite sure whether I'm still in time or not. But if people would like to ask me questions after this, I will answer. As I said, I've listened with fascination at the mind of America, speaking with hope and enthusiasm. And I wonder how we can ensure that we engage the mind of America in the reconstruction and development of South Africa. And indeed, in the reconstruction and development of Africa, and perhaps in the promotion of development as a whole. There is a sense in which, for me, the American project, as we call it in South Africa, is linked to the South African project. You're more or less at a far, far, far stage. You drew your constitution a long time ago. We come late. We've drawn on the key elements of your constitution and gone a step further in ours. You are such a diversity of society, as is South Africa, that mirrors the world as it were. You've accomplished a lot of things. I believe in my heart that it's important that you sustain that by ensuring that you do not recoil as America. Enable us to complete what you started by reaching us to us through your technology, through your designs, and through all manner of information that you have. Again, I'm still digesting what I had here. I see possibilities. We start our development at a very exciting time when technological advances are so far ahead, but at the same time, they open such a wide gap between us. And the critical thing is to ensure that, is to find a way in which we bridge that gap. We bridge the gap and we move forward together. Am I within time? Okay. And we move forward together. As I said, the key challenge is redressing the legacy of apartheid, which was embedded in South Africa for over 48 years. It is ensuring that together South Africa and its neighboring states are uplifted to interact with the international community in an effective manner. It is to ensure that Africa, which stands a chance now of arriving where it should go, that it is also uplifted. There's an interesting thing happening in Africa at the moment. There's a younger generation of leaders who are saying that we can't keep on saying we were colonized, and therefore that's why we are where we are. That we need to move beyond that and say, what is it that needs to be done to ensure that we draw on the resources of our continent to rebuild. Again, I see opportunities for applying the mind of America to complete the grand project of America, which I think was distinctive in its nobility, in the spirit that drove it, in cherishing democracy, liberty, and founded also on the Bill of Rights, in creating an environment in which the human spirit can thrive. As I said, we still have a long road ahead of us. We have a new leader in South Africa who is as much a maker of the new South Africa as Mandela is. I see Thabo Mbeki as the brains of South Africa. Mandela was the heart of South Africa. I hope one day that he'll be able to come and see what I've seen here. I'm not sure I can even begin to describe it to him, but I pose the question to you. How do we ensure that the mind or the work that you do here enables us to transcend the barriers, to narrow the poverty gap, and to move together, as it were? I thank you. I said if I've shortchanged you, get Richard to invite me for next year.
Thank you. Thank you.